All right, let's talk about driving, baby. Specifically, driving like you stole something. You ever been on the highway just trying to get from A to B when suddenly it's like everyone took crazy pills? You got folks weaving in and out of lanes like they're playing a high-stakes game of chicken. Now Larry, he was a man on a mission, or so he thought. Problem was, he was always in such a darn hurry that he usually missed the point entirely. One time Larry was racing to a family reunion, convinced he was running late, as always. He was weaving through traffic like a caffeinated squirrel, dodging cars left and right. He finally screeched to a halt, chest heaving, only to realize he was a week early. The reunion wasn't even happening yet. See, that's the thing about rushing. Sometimes you end up right where you're supposed to be, just at the wrong time. Larry's need for speed was legendary. He once got pulled over by a cop who just shook his head and said, "Son, you were going so fast, you almost went back in time." Larry, being Larry, just grinned and said, "Yeah, but did I make it to yesterday?" The truth was, Larry wasn't really going anywhere in particular. He was running from boredom, from routine, from the fear of missing out. But in his haste, he was missing out on the present moment, on the simple joy of the journey. Now, Slowpoke Sue, she was a whole different story. In a world where everyone seemed to be in a rush, Sue was a breath of fresh air. She drove an old beat-up car that she had lovingly decorated with flowers and peace signs, a true reflection of her laid-back personality. Sue wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere, and that drove some folks crazy. You'd often see frustrated drivers stuck behind her, their faces red with anger, honking their horns and gesturing wildly. But Sue, she just kept on driving at her own pace, completely unfazed by the chaos around her. They'd honk and yell, but Sue would just smile serenely and wave. She had this incredible ability to stay calm in situations that would drive most people up the wall. It was as if she had a secret that the rest of us hadn't figured out yet. She had a knack for finding the silver lining in every traffic jam, the beauty in the mundane. While others saw traffic as a nuisance, Sue saw it as an opportunity to slow down and appreciate the little things in life. She'd noticed the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, or the interesting patterns on the pavement. One day, Sue was cruising along at her usual leisurely pace when a massive traffic jam brought the highway to a standstill. It was one of those jams that seemed to stretch on forever, with no end in sight. Cars were lined up for miles, and the air was thick with frustration. People were losing their minds, horns were blaring, tempers were flaring, but Sue just pulled out a book and made herself comfortable. She had a way of turning even the most stressful situations into moments of peace and tranquility. Turns out, there was a huge accident up ahead, and the highway was closed for hours. Emergency vehicles were struggling to get through, and it was clear that no one was going anywhere anytime soon. Guess who was the only one not stressed? Yep, Slowpoke Sue. While everyone else was fuming and fretting, Sue was as relaxed as could be. She just shrugged, grabbed her knitting needles, and settled in for the long haul. She just shrugged, grabbed her knitting needles, and settled in for the long haul. She had a way of making herself comfortable no matter where she was. It was a talent, really, to be able to find peace in the midst of chaos. While everyone else was fuming and fretting, Sue was chilling out, maxing and relaxing all cool. She had a thermos of tea, a cozy blanket, and her favorite playlist on the radio. It was like she had turned her car into a little oasis of calm. See, sometimes the slowest way is actually the fastest, or at least the most enjoyable. Sue had figured out that life wasn't about rushing from one place to another, but about enjoying the journey along the way. Sue taught us all a valuable lesson that day. Life's not a race, people. It's a journey to be savored, not a finish line to be crossed at breakneck speed. In a world that constantly pushes us to go faster and do more, Sue reminded us that it's okay to slow down, take a deep breath, and enjoy the ride. As the traffic finally started to clear and the cars began to move again, Sue's car was the last to leave the jam. She drove off into the sunset, her car a beacon of peace and tranquility in a world that often feels too rushed. And as she disappeared into the horizon, we couldn't help but feel a little more at ease, a little more willing to take things slow. Inspired by Sue's calmness, some of the other drivers started to relax too. They turned down their radios, took a sip of their drinks, and even smiled at each other. It was as if Sue's peaceful energy had spread through the entire traffic jam, reminding everyone that sometimes slowing down is the best way to move forward. Later that evening, Sue parked her car at a scenic overlook and took in the view. She watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a perfect end to a day that had started with frustration, but ended with a sense of peace and contentment. Sue's car, with its flowers and peace signs, had become a symbol of tranquility. It was a reminder that no matter how chaotic life gets, we always have the choice to slow down, find our center, and enjoy the journey. And in doing so, we might just find that the journey itself is the most beautiful part of all. Now let's talk about tailgater Tim, the king of the close-up. Tim's idea of a safe following distance was practically breathing down your neck. He'd be so close you could read your own license plate number in his headlights. One time, Tim was tailgating this little old lady in a beat-up station wagon. She was driving the speed limit, but Tim was convinced she was personally slowing him down. He was honking, flashing his lights, doing everything but performing a magic trick to get her to move. Little did Tim know, that little old lady was actually a retired race car driver. She finally had enough of his shenanigans, slammed on the brakes and did a donut around him, leaving Tim in a cloud of dust and regret. The moral of the story? Don't underestimate little old ladies in station wagons, especially if they're wearing driving gloves. Tim, my man, you've got to learn the art of chill. Give people their space, breathe, enjoy the ride. You'll get there eventually, I promise. Unless you cause an accident, then you're definitely not going anywhere fast. Section 5, Multitasking Mary, the Queen of Chaos. And then there's Multitasking Mary, the Queen of Doing It All, badly. Mary's car was like a mobile office, salon and snack bar all rolled into one. She'd be driving with her knees, applying makeup, texting and scarfing down a burger, all at the same time. One time, Mary was so busy trying to find the perfect playlist on her phone that she accidentally rear-ended a police car at a red light. Let's just say the officer was not impressed with her rendition of "Oops, I did it again." Mary, listen. I know you're a woman of many talents, but driving requires your full attention. Put down the phone, put away the makeup, and for the love of all that is holy, keep your eyes on the road. It's not called multi-distracted driving for a reason. Section 6. Officer Oblivious, Defender of Donuts, Not the Law. Now, you'd think with all this craziness going on, the cops would be on top of it, right? Well, not exactly. See, we got Officer Oblivious, a man who took his job title a little too literally. This guy could sleep through a hurricane, eat donuts during a high-speed chase, and somehow miss the most obvious traffic violations. One time, Leadfoot Larry zoomed past Officer Oblivious while texting and doing his taxes, all at the same time. Oblivious just yawned, scratched his belly and mumbled something about fast cars these days. Officer Oblivious, sir, we need you. Wake up and smell the coffee. Or at least the donuts. We're counting on you to keep these roads safe from the Leadfoot Larrys and the multitasking Marys of the world. So there we have it, folks. The Great Highway Robbery. A daily heist of common sense, patience, and basic driving skills. We got speed demons, slowpokes, tailgaters, multitaskers, and oblivious law enforcement officers, all converging on this asphalt jungle we call the road. It's a recipe for disaster, a comedy of errors, a symphony of honking horns and screeching brakes. But hey, at least it's never boring, right? Just try to keep your sense of humor handy when you're navigating this madness. And for the love of all that is good, keep your eyes on the road. Now, you might be thinking, Kevin, this is all fun and games, but doesn't karma ever catch up with these reckless drivers? Oh, you better believe it does. Karma's got a wicked sense of humor and a lead foot of its own. Remember Leadfoot Larry? Well, one day, Larry was speeding down the highway, late for a very important meeting, or so he thought. He blew past a school bus, cut off a minivan full of nuns, and even flipped off a squirrel crossing the road. Hey, the squirrel started it. Just as Larry was congratulating himself on his skills, he hit a pothole the size of Texas, blowing out all 4 tires and sending his car careening into a ditch. He ended up missing his meeting, covered in mud, and smelling like a skunk had used his car as a bounce house. Karma, baby. Remember Slowpoke Sue? Well, one day Sue was on her way to a meditation retreat, naturally, driving her usual snail's pace. She was passed by everyone, from sports cars to tractors, but Sue remained unfazed. She was in no rush, content to enjoy the scenery and the sound of her wind chimes dangling from her rearview mirror. As fate would have it, there was a huge accident up ahead, caused by none other than Leadfoot Larry and his need for speed. The highway was blocked for miles, and everyone was stuck. Everyone, that is, except for Slowpoke Sue, who just happened to be far enough behind the chaos to avoid it altogether. Sue calmly turned around, found an alternate route, and made it to her retreat on time, feeling refreshed and centered. The tortoise and the hare, people. Slow and steady wins the race. So, what's the moral of the story? Is it that speeding is bad and slow and steady wins the race? Well, yeah, that's part of it. But it's also about more than just driving, isn't it? It's about life. It's about finding the balance between rushing through life and savoring every moment. It's about being present, being aware, and being kind to your fellow drivers and squirrels. It's about realizing that the destination isn't always the point. It's the journey that matters. So buckle up, enjoy the ride, and remember, the finish line is just the beginning of another adventure.